You didn't stumble upon this audiobook by accident. Something inside you is searching for clarity, for strength, for meaning. Here at Audiobook Light, we don't just read books. We speak to the quiet part of you that's ready to grow. So put on your headphones, and let's begin the journey within. Subscribe now if you're ready to grow in silence and rise with intention. You must believe in yourself. There was a night I will never forget. I was sitting alone in the corner of my room, the world outside still, but inside me a war was raging. Not the kind of war you can see with your eyes, but the kind that invades your mind with questions that burn like fire. Am I enough? Am I worthy? Is there something wrong with me? I had built a life that looked good from the outside, but inside I was crumbling under the weight of doubt. I had dreams, yes. I had talents, yes. But I also had that quiet, cool voice whispering, "You are not capable. Who are you to think you can do something great?" That voice had followed me for years, wearing different masks, sometimes as fear, sometimes as hesitation, sometimes as fake humility. And for too long, I believed it. If you are holding this book, there is a part of you that knows what I am talking about. Maybe you are at the edge of your next big step and you feel frozen. Maybe you are surrounded by people who do not see you for who you truly are. Or maybe you have just grown tired of the lies you keep telling yourself. I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me, not as a motivational line, but as a truth I have bled for. You must believe in yourself. Not in theory. Not just when things are going well. You must believe in yourself when everything is quiet, when no one is watching, when you are scared, when you fail, when you rise, when you fall again. Because belief is not decoration. It is not an accessory. It is the seed of every miracle you will ever create. Belief in yourself is not arrogance. It is not ignoring your flaws or pretending to be perfect. It is the opposite. It is staring into the mirror and seeing the scars and the pain and the chaos and still saying, "I can rise." It is not about what the world says you are. It is about what you decide to become. I have seen too many people die with their gifts still in them. Not because they lacked skill, but because they lacked belief. Talent is not enough. Opportunity is not enough. You can have the door wide open and still refuse to walk through if you do not think you deserve what is on the other side. That is the silent tragedy. The world never sees what you could have done. But you know. Deep inside you know. This book is not for the faint of heart. It is for the ones who have fallen so many times that they almost forgot how to stand. It is for the ones who feel invisible. The ones who gave everything and still felt like they were not enough. It is for the ones whose families did not understand them, whose teachers doubted them, whose friends outgrew them. It is for the quiet warriors. The ones who want more not out of greed, but because their spirit is too big to stay small. If that is you, then you are not broken. You are awakening. And this book is your mirror. It will not always be easy to look at. But it will show you who you really are underneath the masks, underneath the fear, underneath the conditioning. And what you will see is not someone weak, but someone waiting. Someone chosen. Someone capable of more than you dare to imagine. The core philosophy of this book is this: belief is the root. Everything else, your habits, your results, your relationships, your confidence grows from that root. You can read every book, attend every seminar, recite every affirmation. That is why most people stay stuck. They work on the branches but never heal the root. They chase strategies but ignore identity. They want a better life without becoming a better version of themselves. But here is the truth: your life is a mirror of your belief. You will only reach for what you think you deserve. You will only fight for what you think is possible. You will only attract what you think you are worth. That is not magic, it is law. When you believe in yourself, something sacred begins. You start walking differently, speaking differently. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop waiting for permission. You stop hiding. You begin to create. You begin to attract. You begin to transform. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And when that shift happens, when belief takes root, no one can take it from you. Not criticism. Not rejection. Not failure. Not even time. You become the kind of person who keeps going, not because it is easy, but because you finally know who you are. That is the goal. Not to impress others. Not to prove them wrong. But to live fully, deeply, and truly because you finally believe you are worthy of that kind of life. As you read the next parts of this book, you will find stories, ideas, and mindsets that will challenge you. You will recognize parts of yourself you have forgotten. You will face the lies you have been taught, the chains you did not know you were wearing. But most of all, you will discover the truth that belief is not something you are given. It is something you choose. And once you choose it, everything changes. Chapter 1. From Doubt to Decision. There is a quiet pain that many carry, a pain that does not scream but lingers like fog in the morning, wrapping itself around your thoughts, your actions, your voice. It is the pain of doubting yourself. I remember the first time I truly felt it. I had just walked out of a room full of people, and I had spoken, but my voice had trembled. Not because I did not know what to say, but because something inside me questioned whether I was allowed to say it. Whether I was good enough to be heard. And as I walked down the hallway alone, every step echoed with the thought, they saw through you. They know you are not real. It did not matter that I had studied, prepared, or even been invited. The doubt lived in me like a shadow, and it followed me no matter how much light I tried to shine. That is the nature of self-minus doubt. It is not logical. It is not fair. It does not care how many qualifications you have or how hard you work. It whispers at the most crucial moments and makes you question everything. And the tragedy is not that it appears. The tragedy is that we believe it. Because somewhere along the way, someone taught us to. Maybe it was the parent who never said, "I am proud of you." Maybe it was the teacher who looked disappointed when you failed one test. Maybe it was the friend who laughed when you shared your dream. These moments etch themselves into our memory, and without realizing it, we start to build our identity around them. We begin to believe that playing small is safer than being seen. But the truth is, no one is born doubting themselves. Watch a child. Watch how they reach. How they fall under eyes. How they speak with passion, sing without shame, dance without music. That is our original state, unfiltered, fearless, full of fire. So, what happened? Life. Rejection. Comparison. The world told us we needed to earn our worth. That we had to become someone else to be loved. That being ourselves was risky. And so, layer by layer, we covered who we were with who we thought we needed to be. We stopped raising our hands. We stopped speaking up. We stopped trying unless we were sure we would succeed. And slowly, the doubt grew stronger than the dream. I have met people who are brilliant beyond measure but paralyzed by the fear of not being enough. They stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, environments that shrink them, because they do not trust themselves to choose better. I have seen artists hide their work, entrepreneurs abandon their ideas, leaders silence their voice, all because of one belief: I am not ready. But here is the truth most people never hear. Readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. And it is not made in the absence of fear. Listening to this part reminded me of all the times I played small just to feel safe. But deep down, I knew I was capable of more. This isn't just about confidence, it's about identity. And maybe the real shift starts when we stop asking if we deserve to win, and start acting like we already do. It is made in the presence of it. Because courage is not about being unafraid. It is about deciding that your purpose matters more than your comfort. We must understand what doubt really is. It is a signal, not a sentence. It is the echo of old conditioning, not a prophecy. When you feel doubt, it means you are standing at the edge of something that matters. It means you are about to grow. But instead of seeing it that way, most people turn around. They say, "This must be a sign I am not supposed to do it." No. It is a sign that what you are about to do has the power to change you. And of course it is scary because anything that forces you to expand will always feel uncomfortable at first. But discomfort is not danger. It is a doorway. And the decision to walk through it is yours. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who had a voice that could silence a room. She had sung in private for years, pouring her heart into melodies that only her walls had heard. Friends told her she should perform. Strangers complimented her when they heard her sing softly to herself. But every time she thought about stepping onto a stage, her chest tightened. What if I mess up? What if they laugh? What if I am not good enough? So she stayed silent. For years. Until one day, her daughter, 6 years old, came home from school crying. "They laughed at me when I sang in class," she said. The mother held her and said, "Do not let them stop you. Your voice is beautiful." And in that moment something shifted. Because how could she tell her daughter to be brave if she herself lived in fear? That night she signed up for an open mic. She shook the whole way there. Her voice cracked during the first verse. But she kept going. And when she finished, the room stood in applause. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because she had chosen belief over fear. That is the decision we all must make. You cannot wait for the doubt to disappear before you act. It will not. You must act in spite of it. And when you do, you reclaim the part of yourself that you gave away. Every time you say yes to yourself, the doubt loses power. Every time you take one small step forward, belief is born. Not in one grand moment, but in 1,000 quiet ones. That is how confidence is built. That is how identity is rewritten. Not through magic, but through movement. Through choice. Through the decision to show up anyway. And what happens when you do? Everything changes. Because the world responds not to what you want, but to what you believe you deserve. If you walk into a room unsure of your worth, the world mirrors that uncertainty. But if you walk in with conviction, even quiet conviction, the energy shifts. You become magnetic. Not because you are louder, but because you are clearer. You know who you are. You know what you bring. And that clarity makes you unstoppable. But let me be clear, the decision to believe in yourself is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. Every morning you must choose it again. When you look in the mirror. When you face a challenge. When you hear the voice of doubt creeping in. You must interrupt it. Speak back. Remind yourself who you are. That you are not your past. Not your failures. Not their opinions. You are the result of every time you chose to rise. And you are still rising. Practical application begins with this. Write down one thing you have been afraid to do because you doubted yourself. One thing. It could be starting a business, speaking up at work, ending a toxic relationship, publishing your art, asking for what you deserve. Write it down. Now ask yourself, if I fully believed I could not fail, what would I do next? Whatever the answer is, that is your next step. Not a giant leap. Just one courageous act. Because belief grows through evidence. And every time you act with courage, you give your brain new evidence to trust you. That is how you are wired out into confidence. Not by waiting. By doing. You may not feel ready. That is normal. Do it anyway. You may not feel confident. That is expected. Confidence comes after action, not before. You may not have all the answers. That is okay. Clarity comes through movement. All you need is a decision. A sacred, soul-deep decision that says, I will no longer shrink to fit into places I have outgrown. I will no longer betray myself to please others. I will no longer wait for permission to become who I was born to be. I believe in myself. And I will prove it. Because the moment you decide, the moment you truly commit, doors open. Not always immediately. Not always how you expect. But the universe bends to boldness. Life honors the brave. And when you start living from belief instead of doubt, you will find a strength in yourself you did not know existed. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally returned to who you were all along. Chapter 2. The Lies We Inherited. There is a haunting truth many people never confront. Most of our self-doubt did not start with us. It was planted. Inherited. Passed down like unwanted furniture, like a tattered coat that does not fit, but we wear anyway because it is all we have ever known. Somewhere in your life, someone handed you a belief that said, you are not enough, and because you were too young to know better, you accepted it. That is how generational doubt begins. It hides in the way we speak, the way we hold ourselves, the way we apologize for simply existing. And if we are not careful, we pass it on again like a cycle that never ends. Think back to your childhood. Were you praised for who you were, or only when you performed? Were you encouraged to dream, or told to be realistic? Were you allowed to fail, or shamed when you did? These questions matter. Because belief is not just formed in dramatic moments. It is shaped in subtle patterns: the raised eyebrows, the silence after your idea, the way adults looked away when you spoke. You learned to read the room before you learned to read books. You learned to doubt your instincts before you even had language for them. And the saddest part? You thought it was your fault. But it was not your fault. It was a system. A culture. A lineage of pain dressed as protection. Your parents were not trying to hurt you. They were repeating what they were taught. Their limitations became your reality not because they were true, but because they were familiar. That is the danger of inherited belief. It feels like truth. If everyone around you acts like self-doubt is normal, you assume it is. If no one teaches you how to believe in yourself, you think it is arrogant to even try. And so, generations grow up hiding their light to avoid being judged, being mocked, being too much. But here is the truth: the world forgot to tell you your light was never the problem. The room was just too dim to hold it. Once you realize that most of your limiting beliefs were never yours to begin with, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking you are broken. You start to see the system for what it is: a well-oiled machine designed to keep people small, safe, predictable. The world is not built for the fully awakened. Because someone who believes in themselves is not easy to control. They do not beg for validation. They do not settle for crumbs. They walk differently. They speak with a power that does not ask for permission. And that kind of person makes systems tremble. But before you can become that person, you must unlearn what they taught you. And unlearning is harder than learning. It is painful to look at a belief you have carried your whole life and say, "This is a lie." It is disorienting to realize that the voice in your head was never yours. It was your father's disappointment, your teacher's sarcasm, your ex-lover's criticism, disguised as your own thoughts. But you must face it. You must name the lie before you can replace it with truth. Because what you do not face, you repeat. What you do not heal, you pass on. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. He was brilliant, kind, creative, but he spent most of his life working jobs that drained him. Every time he had an idea, he would shoot it down before anyone else had the chance. "It is not practical," he would say. "I am not the kind of person who starts businesses." One day, a mentor asked him, "Whose voice is that?" He paused. He had never thought to ask. But when he traced the thought back, he remembered something as a child. He once told his uncle he wanted to be an inventor. His uncle laughed and said, "Be serious. People like us do not do things like that." That one sentence wrapped around his potential like chains. He had lived 20-5 years under the weight of a lie spoken into seconds. And when he realized that, he wept. Not out of weakness, but out of release. He finally understood it was never his belief. It was borrowed. And he had the right to return it. So do you. The healing begins with awareness. Start to notice your thoughts, especially the critical ones. Write them down. Ask yourself, whose voice is this? Where did I learn to think this way? Is this belief helping me or hurting me? Is it based on truth or fear? Most of the time you will find that the harshest things you say to yourself are echoes of other people's insecurities. And once you see that, you begin to take your power back. Because if it is not your voice, you can choose not to listen. You can replace it. You can rewire your mind. This is where affirmation becomes powerful, not as empty phrases, but as acts of rebellion. When you say, "I am worthy," you are not just being positive. You are rejecting every lie that said you were not. When you say, "I am capable," you are not just being motivational. You are building a new mental structure brick by brick. Your brain does not care if a thought is true. It believes what you repeat. So repeat truth. Speak life. And when the old lies show up, and they will, you speak louder. You do not negotiate with them. You replace them. But it is not just about words. It is about embodiment. Start acting like someone who believes in themselves. Even if it feels fake at first. Walk with your shoulders back. Look people in the eye. Say what you mean. Ask for what you want. Every small act of confidence sends a message to your nervous system: we are safe to be seen. That is how you rewire the fear. Through repetition. Through action. Through choosing differently again and again, until belief becomes your new default. You do not owe loyalty to the beliefs that hurt you. You do not have to keep wearing the armor that no longer fits. It is okay to outgrow the lies. It is okay to evolve. You are not betraying your family by rising. You are breaking the cycle. You are healing the lineage. And maybe one day, someone younger will look at you and say, because you believed in yourself, I learned to believe too. That is legacy. That is leadership. That is how you change the world, not through grand gestures, but by doing the inner work no one sees. And yes, it will be hard. It will be lonely at times. When you stop agreeing with the old stories, you may feel like you are walking away from everything familiar. But what you are really doing is walking back home. Back to yourself. A self that existed before the world told you who to be. The self that dreams, that creates, that knows. That self has been waiting patiently beneath the noise. And now, finally, you are listening. This chapter is your permission to question everything. To look at your beliefs not as facts, but as choices. To realize that just because something has always been, does not mean it must always be. You have the right to rewrite the story. To choose beliefs that nourish you, strengthen you, liberate you. That is the power of self-minus awareness. It is not just noticing, it is choosing. And every time you choose a higher thought, you build a higher life. So pause now. Ask yourself, what are the beliefs I inherited that no longer serve me? Who do I become when I let them go? The answers will not always come easily. But they will come. And when they do, you will feel it in your bones. You will feel lighter, clearer, stronger. That is what truth feels like. That is what freedom tastes like. And that is what this journey is about. Not becoming someone else, but returning to the truth of who you were before the world told you otherwise. Chapter 3. The Quiet War Within. There is a battle that most people never speak of, not because it is not real, but because it is invisible. It does not take place in boardrooms or on social media. It is not fought with fists or slogans. It is fought in silence behind closed doors, in the quiet of the night when the world is asleep and you are left alone with your thoughts. This is the war between the version of you that wants to rise and the version of you that is terrified to try. It is a civil war of the soul, and unless you learn to master it, it will steal your life from you one day at a time. You have likely felt it. The desire to change something, your job, your relationship, your habits, followed immediately by the fear that maybe you are not capable. The hunger to step forward drowned out by the scream of every past failure. You know what you want, but every time you move toward it, something inside you tightens. That something is the voice of your survival brain. It is the ancient wiring that was designed to keep you alive, not fulfilled. It does not care about your dreams. It only cares about predictability. And to the brain, familiar pain is safer than unfamiliar freedom. That is why so many stay stuck, not because they lack motivation, but because they are biologically wired to resist transformation. But you are not your brain. You are not the fear it generates. You are the awareness behind it. You are the decision minus maker. And that distinction is everything. Because the moment you realize you can observe your thoughts, you are no longer enslaved by them. You become the master. But mastery does not mean the absence of fear. It means learning to dance with it. To hear the voice that says, you will fail, and still take the step. To feel the doubt but not feed it. To keep showing up, not because it is easy, but because you finally understand the cost of silence. One of the most common traps people fall into is the idea that something outside of them will finally silence the war within. They think, once I get the job, once I find the partner, once I make the money, then I will feel confident. Then I will believe in myself. But external success does not heal internal doubt. In fact, it often magnifies it. You can win awards and still feel like a fraud. You can be admired by millions and still cry alone, wondering if any of it is real. Because no amount of applause can replace the sound of your own inner approval. Until you learn to love yourself in the absence of achievement, You will never feel safe in the presence of it. I used to wait for the perfect moment, more proof, more preparation, more permission. But this chapter made something click. You don't need permission to own your life. You just need to act like it already belongs to you. That one shift changes everything. I once met a man who had built a multi-million-dollar company. From the outside, he was the picture of success: sharp suits, a powerful team, a reputation that commanded respect. But behind the scenes, he lived in torment. Every win felt empty. Every praise was met with suspicion. "They do not really see me," he told me. "They see the image I created." And then he said something I will never forget: "I am terrified that if I stop performing, I will disappear." That is the wound most people carry. Not just the fear of failure, but the fear that without their accomplishments, they are nothing. That is the war within. And it must be healed. Healing begins when you make a sacred decision: I will no longer use performance to earn worth. I will no longer confuse achievement with identity. I will not abandon myself to be accepted by others. Because the truth is, the version of you that is most powerful is not the one that tries the hardest to please. It is the one that dares to be honest, to be real, to be raw. That version of you does not need a title or applause. It needs space. It needs your permission. And once you give it that, you will begin to feel peace. Not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer pretending. But do not misunderstand me. This is not about giving up on growth. It is about changing the reason you grow. When your motivation comes from fear, every step forward feels like survival. You are trying to outrun your shame. But when your motivation comes from love, growth becomes sacred. You are no longer fixing yourself. You are revealing yourself. And that is the shift that turns the inner war into an inner revolution. So how do you make that shift? You begin by listening. Most people have never truly listened to themselves. They distract, numb, perform, hustle anything to avoid the stillness. But healing lives in stillness. Truth lives in silence. Sit with yourself. Ask the question, what am I really afraid of? Let the answers come without judgment. You may be surprised. You may find that what you feared was not failure, but rejection. Not risk, but abandonment. Not change, but exposure. And when you see the root, you can finally heal the fruit. Next, learn to speak differently to yourself. The language you use internally is more powerful than any external affirmation. If you constantly tell yourself, "I am not ready, I am not enough, I always mess up," you are casting spells. Your words become your world. But you can change the spell. You can say, "I am learning. I am growing. I am worthy now, not someday." Speak like someone you love. Because you are. Even when you forget it. And finally, act anyway. There is no perfect mindset. There is no perfect moment. The inner critic may always whisper, but it does not get to hold the pen. You do. You are the author. You decide what happens next. You decide if the fear gets to win. And the more you act in defiance of your old patterns, the more you rewrite your nervous system. That is how confidence is born, not from waiting, but from walking. Not from comfort, but from courageous action repeated over time. It will not be easy. The old voices will fight back. The fear will disguise itself in logic. It will say, "Now is not the right time," or "You need more training," or "You are too old, too young, too late." But all of those are illusions. The truth is, now is always the only time you have. And belief is always a choice you must make before the evidence shows up. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are being prepared. The war within is not a sign that something is wrong, it is proof that something is waking up. That the old story is being challenged. That the new story is waiting. And it is not a story of perfection. It is a story of presence, of resilience, of a soul that refused to stay silent. So do not wait for the fear to vanish. It may never leave, but it will grow smaller each time you move anyway. And eventually what once screamed will become a whisper. What once controlled you will become background noise. And the voice that rises above it all, the voice of your truth, will become the one you finally trust. That is how you win the quiet war. Chapter 4. The Cost of Playing Small. There is a moment in every person's life when they feel the ache of something greater calling them. It might come as a whisper in the dark, a sudden thought in the middle of an ordinary day, or a wave of emotion after watching someone else do what you know you were born for. It does not shout. It does not demand. But it stirs something in your soul that will not leave you alone. That is purpose speaking. That is the vision of your higher self knocking. And for many, it is the most terrifying sound in the world. Because the moment you hear it, you are confronted with a truth that is impossible to unhear. You were made for more. But here is where the tragedy begins. Most people hear the call and turn away. Not because they do not care, but because they have been trained to play small. They have been taught to shrink their dreams to fit into the comfort zones of others. They have been told to be realistic, to not make waves, to color inside the lines. And slowly, they begin to confuse humility with hiding. They wear invisibility like a virtue. They convince themselves that staying quiet is noble, that playing safe is responsible, that waiting is wise. But deep down, they feel it. The hollowness, the ache, the quiet regret that whispers you are meant for more than this. You see, playing small has a cost, and it is far greater than the price of failure. Failure is temporary. It teaches. It transforms. But playing small is permanent. It does not just steal opportunities. It steals identity. Every time you silence your voice, you forget a little more who you are. Every time you hold back your gift, the world becomes a little dimmer. Not because your talent is everything, but because your presence was meant to change something. When you deny yourself, you deny someone else the miracle of your authenticity. And that is not humility. That is abandonment. Why do we do this? Why do we settle for half-minus lives and half-minus dreams? It comes down to conditioning. From an early age, we are taught to seek approval. We learn quickly what makes others happy, what makes us likable, what earns us love. And we adjust. We mute our truth. We sacrifice our fire. Not because we are weak, but because we are wired to survive. We think if I am accepted, I will be safe, but that safety is an illusion. Because while the world may love the version of you that fits their mold, you will resent that version. You will wake up one day and realize that the life you built does not belong to you. And that pain will be heavier than any rejection could have been. The cost of playing small is your life unlived. It is the book unwritten, the song unsung, the love unexpressed. It is the idea that dies inside you because you were waiting for certainty. But certainty never comes. Not in the way we hope. There is no perfect moment. No universal green light. There is only a choice to bet on yourself even when the outcome is unclear. To step into your calling even when your knees are shaking. Because greatness is not born in comfort. It is born in the fire of your decision to rise. I once spoke with a woman who had spent 20 years in a job she hated. She was talented, educated, full of ideas, but she stayed in the same role, with the same title, year after year. When I asked her why, she said, "I did not want to risk everything I built." I nodded. Then I asked, "But what if the real risk is staying where you no longer belong?" She was silent. And then the tears came. No one ever said that to me before. That is the lie of the small life. It convinces you that security is worth the sacrifice of your soul. But the truth is, the longer you ignore your gift, the louder the pain becomes. Not all prisons have bars. Some have paychecks, approval, and predictability. But let me be clear, choosing to no longer play small does not mean you have to burn everything down. It means you start being honest. With yourself. With others. It means you stop pretending to be okay with mediocrity. It means you begin to walk with a new standard, not of arrogance but of alignment. It means you no longer entertain things, people, or patterns that require you to shrink. That may mean hard conversations. That may mean changes. But it will also mean freedom. And the moment you taste that freedom, you will wonder how you ever lived without it. The first step is to tell the truth. Where am I playing small? Where have I been hiding behind excuses? What dream have I labeled someday that should be now? These questions are not meant to shame you. They are meant to awaken you. Because awareness is the birthplace of change. And once you see the cost of your silence, you can no longer afford to keep paying it. Then comes the decision. And yes, it is terrifying. But you are not alone. Every person who has ever done something meaningful has stood where you are, on the edge, trembling, uncertain, but choosing anyway. That is the moment of rebirth. Not when you have everything figured out, but when you say, "I will no longer abandon myself." That one sentence has the power to split timelines, to open doors, to rewrite destinies. You may lose people. You may face criticism. You may feel like a stranger in your own life for a while. But what you gain is priceless: your voice, your fire, your full presence. And with that, you can build a life that reflects who you really are, not just what others expected of you. Practical application begins now. Identify one area in your life where you have been shrinking. Be specific. Then write down one bold action you can take to reclaim that space. It could be a conversation, a creation, a boundary. Whatever it is, make it real. Then do it. Not because you feel ready, but because your soul is done waiting. You will be surprised how quickly your world shifts when you stop negotiating with your own potential. Remember this: playing small does not serve the world. Your silence does not protect anyone. Your hiding does not make others more comfortable. It just makes you less alive. And there is no prize for being invisible. There is only regret. But when you choose to rise, when you choose to show up fully, the world adjusts. People may resist at first, but eventually the right ones will see you. The right ones will celebrate you. And more importantly, you will see yourself again. And that reunion is worth everything. You were not born to dim. You were born to burn. Chapter 5. Becoming the person who believes. There is a sacred transformation that does not happen all at once but unfolds slowly, like the rising of the sun after a long night. It begins the moment you stop asking, "What do I need to do?" and start asking, "Who do I need to become?" It is about becoming a new version of yourself, a version who no longer needs convincing, who no longer waits for signs, who lives as if the truth of their worth has already been written. You see, many people try to change their lives by changing their circumstances. They move cities, switch jobs, leave relationships. And while sometimes those changes are necessary, they often discover something unsettling. The same patterns follow them. The same fears resurface. The same doubts whisper again. Why? Because they changed their environment but not their identity. They tried to build a new life with the blueprint of the old self. And so, nothing truly changed. That is why belief must begin on the inside. Because until you become the kind of person who believes, your world will reflect your old doubts, no matter how hard you work to escape them. But here is the good news: identity is not fixed. You are not bound to who you have been. You are not the story you inherited, the mistakes you made, or the labels you were given. You are a living, breathing becoming. And every day you are either reinforcing the version of yourself that doubts or the version that believes. That choice is not made once. It is made every morning. Every conversation. Every decision to speak or stay silent. And every small choice you make in alignment with belief plants a seed in your soul that says, I trust myself. So who is the person who believes in themselves? What do they look like, not just externally, but internally? They are not fearless. They are faithful. They have doubts, but they do not bow to them. They have moments of insecurity, but they do not let those moments define their movement. They walk into rooms without needing to be the loudest, because they know the power of their presence. They say no when something violates their peace. They say yes when something aligns with their soul. They live with intention. They take responsibility. And most of all, they treat themselves with honor. Honor is the foundation of belief. Because you will never truly trust someone you constantly betray. And yet, most people betray themselves daily. They say yes when they mean no. They stay quiet when their truth is screaming. They tolerate things that chip away at their dignity. And then they wonder why they cannot believe in themselves. But belief is not built in the grand moments. It is built in the thousands of silent choices you make when no one is watching. Every time you honor your intuition, your values, your truth, you build trust. You build belief. And that belief becomes unshakable, not because it is loud, but because it is rooted. Let me tell you about James. For years, he struggled with confidence. He had ideas but never spoke up. He wanted to lead but always deferred. He thought belief would come when someone else finally recognized his worth. But one day, he got tired. Not of life, but of hiding. He began to study people who carried quiet confidence. He noticed something. They were not the smartest. They were not always the most experienced. But they all had one thing in common: they acted like they belonged. Not because they were perfect, but because they decided to. So James tried something radical. He started showing up as that version of himself. Not pretending. Embodying. He stood straighter. Spoke slower. Said what he thought. Made decisions. At first, it felt awkward, like wearing clothes too big. But soon, the world responded. And more importantly, he did. Because identity does not change by chance. It changes by choice. So ask yourself, who would I be if I fully believed in myself? How would I speak? Walk? Create? Lead? Now take one step as that version today. Not tomorrow. Today. It might be small. Sending the email. Making the call. Raising your hand. Speaking your truth. I never realized how many of my decisions came from fear of judgment, failure, or not being enough. But this message cuts through all that noise. Winning isn't about impressing anyone. It's about showing up fully for yourself. And finally, I'm learning to do just that. Do it not for the outcome, but for the signal it sends to your nervous system. This is who I am now. Repetition rewires identity. The more you act like someone who believes, the more you become that person. But let me warn you, this journey will be uncomfortable. Because stepping into belief means shedding the identity you built for survival. And that identity may have served you for years. And it kept you safe. It kept you accepted. But now it keeps you stuck. So there will be grief. There will be moments when you feel like a stranger in your own life. That is normal. That is rebirth. Do not run from it. Honor it. Mourn who you had to be. Then bless them and let them go. Because what is waiting on the other side is not a better you. It is the real you. One of the most powerful things you can do is create rituals that reinforce your new identity. Not just morning routines, but moments of sacred intention. Speak to yourself in the mirror. Not surface affirmations, but declarations from the soul. I trust myself. I am enough now. I honor my voice. Write letters to the old version of you, thanking them for surviving. Write letters to your future self, promising you will no longer abandon them. Surround yourself with reminders, quotes, music, symbols that reflect who you are becoming. Because identity is shaped by environment. Make yours a sanctuary for belief. And remember this: the person you are becoming already exists. They are not a stranger. They are you, without the fear. Without the conditioning. Without the weight of proving. Your job is not to create them, but to uncover them. To remove what no longer belongs. To strip away the masks, the doubts, the false stories. And the more you do, the more you will feel it. That peace. That power. That certainty that says, I am not becoming something new. I am finally becoming myself. So do not chase belief. Embody it. Do not wait for proof. Be the proof. And every day, return to the question, who am I becoming? Then live the answer. That is how you become the person who believes. Chapter 6. The decision that changes everything. There comes a moment when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. That moment is not loud. It does not always come with fireworks or clarity. Sometimes it arrives in the quietest hour, when you are sitting alone with your thoughts, staring at the ceiling, wondering how you ended up so far from who you wanted to be. It might come after a disappointment, a heartbreak, a betrayal, or simply a slow erosion of joy. But in that moment, something in you whispers, no more, not as a question, not as a wish, but as a command. And that is when everything begins to shift. The truth is, transformation is not a product of time. It is a product of decision. People wait their whole lives hoping for the right season, the right sign, the right spark. But the ones who rise are the ones who decide. They do not wait to feel ready. They do not beg for certainty. They draw a line in the sand and say, this version of me is done. And in that sacred declaration, the old self begins to dissolve. Not because the world changes, but because they do. Because they finally stop negotiating with their limitations. They stop bowing to fear. They stop asking for permission to live fully. They decide. But let us be clear, this kind of decision is not casual. It is not the kind you make on a whim and abandon by the weekend. This decision is deep. It lives in the bone. It shifts your posture, your habits, your language. It rewrites the standard by which you live. And it creates tension because everything that does not align with your new identity begins to feel unbearable. The job that once felt okay starts to feel like a cage. The relationships you tolerated begin to feel like anchors. The patterns you could justify become unbearable. That is not a sign that something is wrong. It is proof that your soul has upgraded. And now your life must catch up. People often ask, how do I know if I have truly decided? You know because the cost of going backward becomes too high. You know because you no longer look for loopholes. You stop explaining your dreams to people who cannot see. You stop editing your truth to make others comfortable. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what if I never try? That shift is everything. Because once you truly decide, life begins to respond. Opportunities reveal themselves. People appear. Ideas come. Not because they were not there before, but because you were not yet the version of yourself who could see them. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Andre who spent most of his life working in finance, doing what was expected of him. He made good money, had respect, stability, the illusion of success. But every night, he would go home and paint. Not for fame. Not for approval. Just because it made him feel alive. Yet he never showed anyone. It is just a hobby, he would say. Until one day, a colleague saw a piece he had left out and said, "You should be doing this for a living." Andre laughed. But that night, he could not sleep. Something shifted. The next day, he sat alone and whispered those two words, no more. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more shrinking. Within a year, he was selling Artful minus time. Not because he got lucky, but because he decided. That is the power of a real decision. It is not about removing fear. It is about removing the option of retreat. It is about saying, I do not know how, but I will, and from that place you move. You make the call. You write the first page. You leave the old pattern. You begin. And the momentum you create by simply beginning becomes your new fuel. Because energy flows where commitment goes. And when your commitment is real, the energy is unstoppable. But understand this: deciding once is not enough. You must recommit daily. Because doubt will return. Life will test you. The world will try to pull you back into old patterns. That is why you must protect your decision like it is sacred, because it is. You must surround yourself with reminders of who you are becoming. Create rituals. Speak your truth out loud. Celebrate every small act of alignment. And when the old self calls on it, will you look it in the eye and say, I love you, but I no longer live there. One of the most liberating things you can do is burn the bridge to who you used to be. Not out of hate, but out of love. Because the longer you keep the door open to your old identity, the more tempted you will be to return. And every time you return, you send a message to your soul that says, maybe I do not deserve more, but you do. You always did. And now it is time to live like it. Practical application begins with writing a personal declaration. Not a goal. Not a wish. A declaration. One sentence that says, I will no longer, I now choose. Make it real. Make it bold. Write it, say it, live it. Then take one action that reflects that new decision. Even if it is small. Even if it scares you. Especially if it scares you. Because courage compounds. And every act of courage makes the next one easier. You do not need the whole path. You need a pulse of faith. You need one choice, one step, one moment of radical self-honor. And from that place you rise. Not because the fear disappears, but because you have finally decided that your dream matters more than your doubt. So, what is it for you? What have you been postponing? What decision has been whispering in your soul for years? Listen. And when it speaks, do not negotiate. Do not delay. Do not explain. Just decide. Because in the end, it is not talent that separates the fulfilled from the forgotten. It is not luck or timing or background. It is the decision to believe. The decision to become. The decision to rise. And today, that decision is yours. Chapter 7. Walking Through the Fire. There is a truth you will not find in many books, but you will feel it in your bones if you have ever dared to rise above your fear. Every transformation demands a fire. Not a literal fire, but a season of heat pressure. Discomfort, the kind of pain that does not break you, but reveals you. The fire strips away what is not real. It burns the illusion. It tests the decision you made in the silence. Because belief, no matter how deeply rooted, is not proven in the calm. It is proven in the storm. Many people begin their journey with excitement. They read the books, make the vision board, write the goals, and for a while, it works. The momentum is real. But then life happens. Something unexpected comes. A door closes. A person leaves. The old fear returns. And suddenly, the dream that once felt possible feels foolish. Maybe I was wrong, they think. Maybe this is a sign I should give up. But that is not a sign of failure. That is the fire. And it shows up not to destroy you, but to refine you. The fire is sacred. It is the place where every part of you that was built on fear is forced to melt. Your ego, your excuses, your expectations, your need to control. All of it is placed in the flame. And what emerges is not the version of you who started the journey, but the version who can finish it. That is why the fire is not punishment. It is preparation. Because who you are becoming cannot carry the weight of greatness with the weakness of the past still clinging to your shoulders. The old must burn so the true can rise. But most people run from the fire. They mistake the discomfort for danger. They think, if it is this hard, it must not be right, but that is the lie. The truth is, the fire is often a sign that you are on the edge of breakthrough. It means your old story is losing its grip. It means your nervous system is adjusting to a new identity. And yes, it is painful. But pain is not the enemy. It is the price. And when you learn to walk through it, not numb it, not avoid it, not negotiate with it, you discover something extraordinary. You are stronger than you thought. I once spoke with a woman named Malia who had spent years building a version of herself that everyone admired. She was successful, articulate, kind. But inside, she felt like a stranger in her own life. She had built everything on approval. And when she decided to live for herself, the fire came. Friends pulled away. Her relationship crumbled. Her body reacted with anxiety. She called me one day and said, "I feel like everything is falling apart." I told her, "No, it is falling into place. The lies are leaving. And that hurts. But what is left will be real." And it was. Because she stayed in the fire. She did not run. And months later, her voice had changed. Her eyes had a new steadiness. She no longer asked for permission to exist. That is the gift of the fire. It gives you yourself. But to receive that gift, you must understand its laws. First, the fire does not ask for your comfort. It asks for your commitment. You will be asked to release what is familiar. You will be asked to feel what you have avoided. You will be asked to trust what you cannot see. And in those moments, your ego will scream. It will say, "This is too much. This is not fair. You are not ready." But that voice is the echo of your old identity trying to survive. Do not let it win. Stand firm. Remember why you began. Remember who you are becoming. Second, the fire reveals what you truly believe. When everything is calm, belief is easy. But in the fire, the truth comes out. Do you believe you are worthy even when no one applauds? Do you believe you are strong even when everything feels like it is falling apart? Do you believe in your dream even when there is no proof it will work? Those questions are answered not in your words but in your actions. The way you show up when no one is watching. The way you speak to yourself when the results are not there yet. That is where belief is forged. Third, you are not meant to walk through the fire alone. Pride will tell you to do it yourself. Fear will tell you no one will understand. But healing often happens in connection. Find someone who sees you. Speak your truth without apology. Let yourself be held. There is power in being witnessed. There is courage in saying, "I am not okay, but I am still going." That vulnerability is not weakness. It is the beginning of real strength. And finally, trust that the fire ends. It may last longer than you want. It may burn deeper than you imagined. But it will not last forever. On the other side is clarity, power, wholeness. You will not be the same, but that is the point. You are never meant to stay the same. You are meant to evolve, to grow, to shed what no longer serves. And the fire is the sacred space where that transformation becomes irreversible. So what does this mean practically? It means when the fire comes, you do not retreat. You breathe. You stay. You keep showing up. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. You move forward. You take the meeting. You write the chapter. You speak the truth. You do the thing that fear says is impossible. Because every time you act from belief in the middle of the fire, you change your future. You are not just surviving, you are creating. Write this down: I am willing to walk through the fire for the life I deserve. Say it again. Until your cells believe it. Until your fear bows to it. Until your life reflects it. Because when you stop fearing the fire, you become dangerous to every limit that ever held you back. You become a force, a presence, a soul on fire. You were not made for lukewarm living. You are made for the heat, for the refining, for the holy transformation that turns brokenness into brilliance, fear into fire, doubt into destiny. So walk through the fire. And when you reach the other side, you will not be the same. You will be free. Chapter 8. Protecting your becoming. Once you have walked through the fire, once you have dared to say yes to the truest version of yourself, you will encounter something few prepare you for: the subtle resistance of the world that once knew you as someone else. You have changed. You have shed the weight of old stories. But the people around you, the systems around you, they may not have evolved with you. And this is where the real battle begins: not to become, but to remain. You see, it is one thing to rise. It is another thing to protect what you have become. It is one thing to have a breakthrough. It is another to live from it. Because after the moment of clarity, the glow of transformation, the echo of the fire still warm in your chest, life goes on. The world does not stop spinning for your awakening. The bills still come. The phone still rings. The people in your life may still expect you to be who you used to be. And it becomes painfully clear if you are not intentional, you will slip back into the old shape just to keep the peace. Do not let that happen. Because here is the truth: growth offends the familiar. Your evolution will trigger the parts of others that have not yet chosen to evolve. And sometimes the resistance will not come as hostility. It will come as subtle remarks, as raised eyebrows, as jokes that sound harmless but sting. You have changed, they will say, as if it were an insult. You are so intense now. You are not as fun as you used to be. And if you are not anchored in your new identity, those words will feel like truth. But they are not truth. They are tests. Tests of loyalty not to others, but to yourself. You must remember that not everyone will understand your journey. Some people only love the version of you that did not make them uncomfortable. Some only supported you when you were smaller, softer, easier to manage. And now that you have boundaries, now that you speak your truth, now that you are no longer afraid to be seen, they do not know what to do with you. That is not your fault. That is not your problem to fix. You are not responsible for shrinking just to keep others comfortable. This is why you must protect your becoming. You must guard it like a sacred flame. That means becoming ruthless about what you allow into your mind, your spirit, your space. That means choosing conversations that build, not belittle. That means learning to say no with love, and yes with intention. That means walking away from what no longer resonates, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because every yes to something misaligned is a no to the version of you who is still unfolding. And let me be honest, it will be lonely at times. When you begin to honor your worth, the room gets quieter. When you stop performing, some applause will fade. When you begin to demand respect, some people will walk away. That is not a loss. That is alignment. Because as you rise, you make space for the people who were waiting for you to finally show up as your whole self. The ones who love you not for who you pretend to be, but for who you truly are. And those people cannot find you if you keep hiding. One of the most painful lessons in growth is this: you must let go of good to reach for great. You must release the average to touch the extraordinary. And that means some relationships, some habits, some familiar comforts must be left behind. Not because they are evil, but because they belong to an old frequency that you no longer live on. You cannot stay in environments that suffocate your expansion and expect to thrive. Your life will only rise to the level of what you allow. So ask yourself, what am I still holding on to that is anchoring me to the version of me I have outgrown? What conversations, what habits, what roles? You may find that the greatest threat to your becoming is not failure, but familiarity. You are comfortable with pain you recognize. But comfort is not the same as peace. And peace is the new standard. Peace is the new success. Peace is what your soul has been crying out for. It is time to stop normalizing chaos. Stop tolerating people who only show up when you are in pieces. Stop playing therapist to those who refuse to grow. Stop proving yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You are not here to fix everyone. You are here to become who you were always meant to be. And that requires discipline, boundaries, honor. You must become a guardian of your light. And yet, as you do this, do not let your heart harden. Protection does not require bitterness. You can be fierce and still be kind. You can say no without hate. you can walk away with grace. This is not about building walls. It is about building gates that open to those who love you in truth and close to what drains your spirit. Because your energy is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your vision is sacred. And sacred things must be treated accordingly. Practical application begins with awareness. Each week, ask yourself, what gave me energy? What drained it? Who did I feel expansive around? Who did I feel like I had to shrink for? Then act on that information. Make adjustments. Create space. You are not being selfish. You are being responsible. Because the quality of your life depends on what you protect. Write a new standard for yourself. Not just about what you want, but about what you will no longer tolerate. Then hold yourself to it. Not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because you finally know your worth. And when you know your worth, everything changes. Your posture. Your pace. Your peace. Let this be the season you become unshakable. Not because life is easy, but because your boundaries are clear, your energy is focused, and your identity is rooted. Let this be the season you walk away from anything that dishonors your becoming. Let this be the season you protect your light, fiercely and without apology. Because what you are building now is not just a better life. It is a version of you that cannot be shaken. And that is worth everything. Chapter 9. The Power of Relentless Consistency. There is a quiet truth that separates the dreamers from the doers, the ones who wish from the ones who build consistency. Not perfection. Not brilliance. Not even motivation. Just the simple, often unglamorous choice to show up again. And again. And again. Even when it is boring. Even when it is hard. Even when it feels like nothing is working. Especially then. You see, most people underestimate the power of small actions done consistently over time. They want fireworks transformation in a weekend, change that arrives like a lightning strike. But the real breakthroughs do not come with noise. They come in the silence when no one is clapping, when the progress is invisible, when the only thing keeping you moving is the quiet promise you made to yourself. That promise is your anchor. That discipline is your freedom. Because while motivation fades, consistency compounds. This is where most fall away. Not because they are weak. Not because they are lazy. But because they confuse slow with stuck. They think, if I do not see results right now, it must not be working. So they stop. They pause. They start over. Again and again. And in doing so, they rob themselves of the very momentum that would have carried them into the next season. It is not that they could not build the life they wanted. It is that they stopped too soon. And the tragedy of almost is the heaviest kind of regret. But when you understand the math of belief, everything changes. One action done once is a drop in a bucket. But that same action done daily is a tide. A person who believes in themselves does not rely on energy, they rely on alignment. They understand that what you do consistently, you become permanently. So they choose their habits with reverence. They do not chase emotion. They build structure. And that structure becomes the scaffolding of their next level. Let me tell you about a man named Tariq. He wanted to write a book for years. He had the ideas, the stories, the passion. But he waited for the perfect time. The right energy. The ideal space. It never came. Until one day, he gave himself a rule: write 200 words a day. That is all. No deadlines. No expectations. Just 200 words. Some days he wrote more. Some days he barely wrote at all. But he kept the promise. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. And one day he had a manuscript. Not because of inspiration, but because of consistency. That book went on to change lives. But more importantly, it changed him. You must understand your life is the result of what you repeat. Your body. Your mindset. Your relationships. Your career. All of it reflects what you do consistently, not occasionally. You do not become confident by thinking positively once. You become confident by honoring your word over and over. You do not build trust in yourself by setting goals. You build it by keeping the promises no one else sees. That is how belief becomes identity. That is how desire becomes destiny. But here is where it gets hard. Consistency is not glamorous. It is not always fun. There will be days you feel like quitting. Days when progress is invisible. Days when your old self whispers, "This is pointless." And in those moments, you must remember why you started. You must remember who you are becoming. Because the real test is not in the beginning. It is in the middle. When the excitement fades. When the results lag. When you must choose between comfort and commitment. That is the battle that shapes you. Practical application begins with systems. Do not rely on discipline alone. Create environments that support your becoming. Set your clothes out the night before. Block time for your priorities. Turn your phone off during your sacred hours. Make your space reflect your standards. Because willpower is fleeting, but systems are faithful. And the person who wins is not the one who tries the hardest, it is the one who builds the strongest rhythm. Next, shrink the task. Most people think they lack discipline. What they really lack is a clear entry point. Instead of writing a book, write a paragraph. Instead of running a marathon, take a walk. Instead of meditating for an hour, breathe for 2 minutes. The smaller the task, the less resistance. And once you begin, momentum builds. Action creates clarity. Progress generates passion. The key is not to do more. It is to do something. Every day. No matter what. And finally, celebrate the process. Do not wait until the finish line to feel proud. Feel proud every time you show up when you did not want to. Feel proud when you do the thing even when no one is watching. That is integrity. That is belief in motion. And the more you reward the process, the more your brain associates consistency with success. That rewiring is everything. Because once consistency becomes part of your identity, you no longer need motivation. You become automatic. Let this be the chapter where you stop chasing inspiration and start building momentum. Let this be the season where you stop being a prisoner of your moods and start becoming a master of your rhythm. Let this be the moment you realize that greatness is not some mystical force reserved for the lucky. It is the inevitable result of doing the right things long enough. You do not have to do it perfectly. You just have to keep going. You do not need to see the whole path. Just take the next step. You do not have to feel like it. You just have to act like it matters. Because it does. Every step counts. Every word counts. Every choice counts. And the person who refuses to quit cannot be stopped. Chapter 10. The Mirror and the Mountain. There is a moment in every journey when the dream becomes real, not because it has happened yet, but because you have become the kind of person who can no longer return to who you were. And in that moment, you face two things at once: the mirror and the mountain. The mirror shows you who you are. The mountain reveals what you must climb. And between them stands a single question that will shape everything: are you willing to keep becoming? Because belief is not a destination. It is not a finish line you cross once and then rest forever. Belief is a continual shedding, a continual rising. Every level of your life will require a new version of you. Not because the old you was wrong, but because that version completed its mission. And now the next version is being called. That is what the mountain represents: not an obstacle, but an invitation. A call to higher ground. But before you climb, you must look in the mirror. Not the physical one. The internal one. The mirror of truth. The mirror of patterns. The mirror of accountability. Because what you refuse to face, you will repeat. And what you avoid in the mirror will become the resistance on the mountain. The mirror asks, what am I still carrying that cannot come with me? Maybe it is resentment. Maybe it is ego. Maybe it is the illusion that you must do it all alone. Whatever it is, it will surface. Not to shame you, but to free you. Because every weight you release gives you more strength for the climb. You cannot carry everything and still expect to rise. And you cannot climb the mountain if you are still dragging your past like an anchor. This is why many people stay stuck at the base. Not because they are not capable, but because they refuse to let go. Let go of what they lost. Let go of who hurt them. Let go of who they used to be. They cling to the familiar even when it is heavy. And that attachment becomes the very thing that robs them of ascent. But you, if you are reading this, you are ready. Ready to look in the mirror not with judgment but with love. Ready to take radical responsibility for your next season. Ready to admit what is no longer serving you. And ready to rise not in spite of your past, but because of it. That is the moment everything begins to change. When you stop using your pain as a prison and start using it as a platform. When you stop asking why it happened and start asking what it made you become. Now, let us speak about the mountain. Every dream has one. It is not just a metaphor. It is the literal process of doing what most people avoid. Of showing up when it would be easier to quit. Of pushing through when it feels like no one sees. Of building without applause. Of creating without permission. And the mountain will test you. It will ask for everything. Your focus. Your faith. Your fight. Not to break you, but to build you. Because what is forged in the climb cannot be faked. There is something sacred about choosing to rise when no one expects it. About deciding that you will no longer wait for ease, but pursue excellence instead. That is the spirit of the mountain. Not comfort, but character. And every step you take is a declaration, I will not return to who I was. That choice, repeated daily, becomes your unshakable foundation. But the mountain is not climbed in one leap. It is climbed in steps. Thousands of them. Often in silence. Often in sweat. Often while the world below keeps moving, unaware of your ascent. That is why you must climb for something deeper than validation. You must climb for your soul. For your name. For your future. Because when it gets hard and you will need a reason that lies deeper than comfort. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. He spent most of his adult life trying to prove something. To his father. To his past. To the people who never believed in him. And for a while, it worked. He achieved, he succeeded, he climbed. But one day, halfway up his mountain, he collapsed. Not physically. Spiritually. because he realized he had built everything from a wound, not a vision. And in that moment of silence, he finally asked himself, if I was already enough, what would I build? That question saved him. He descended for a while, not to quit, but to reset, to rebuild with clarity. And when he began to climb again, it was different. This time it was not for approval. It was for alignment. And that shift made him unstoppable. So I ask you, what is your mountain? What scares you because it matters? What have you been delaying because it demands more of you than you have given before? That is your path. That is your proving ground. Not to the world. To yourself. To the version of you that has been whispering all along, we are meant for more than this. And as you climb, you will notice something you begin to change. Not in appearance but in presence. You start to walk with different weight. You speak with more authority. Not arrogance, clarity. Because the mountain refines you. It humbles you. It teaches you who you really are. And when you reach the summit, not if, but when you will look back not with pride alone, but with awe. Ah, at what you overcame. Ah, at what you released. Ah, at who you became in the process. That is the reward of belief. Not just the life you create, but the self you meet along the way. So do not fear the mirror. Do not resist the mountain. Face the truth. Climb the path. And never forget, every step forward is proof that you are no longer who you were. You are becoming. And that is the most powerful thing a human being can do. Chapter 11. The moment you become unstoppable. There is a moment when the tide turns. Not because the waves get softer, but because you have learned how to move with them. Not because life becomes easier, but because you have become stronger, clearer, rooted. It does not look dramatic. It rarely announces itself. But it is there, quiet, steady, undeniable. It is the moment you become unstoppable. And it never happens on the mountaintop. It happens in the valley. In the repetition. In the fire. In the stillness of showing up again when everything says you should walk away. Unstoppable does not mean you no longer feel fear. It means fear no longer controls your steps. Unstoppable does not mean you always win. It means you never stop playing. It means you fall and rise, until rising becomes your nature. Until falling is no longer failure, it is just part of the rhythm. Unstoppable means that your standard for your life is no longer negotiable. That you have looked at every excuse, every reason to give up and said, I hear you. But I am going anyway. You become unstoppable when belief in yourself becomes non-optional. When it is no longer something you access on good days, but something you return to even in the dark. When it becomes your compass, your anchor, your fuel. Not because you always feel it, but because you have trained your spirit to come back to it over and over, like a warrior returning to the fire. And here is the secret no one tells you: becoming unstoppable is not about force. It is about alignment. It is not about pushing harder. It is about letting go of everything that weakens you. The lies. The rows. The masks. The people who keep you questioning your worth. You become unstoppable when you stop asking for permission. When you no longer beg to be seen, or heard, or chosen. When you wake up and realize you were never waiting for the world. The world was waiting for you. Do you know how much of your life you have spent hesitating? How many ideas you buried because you were not sure they would be good enough? How many rooms you shrank in because you were afraid of taking up space? That is not living. That is surviving. And you were not born to survive. You were born to create. to love, to move with certainty. And the only thing standing between the life you want and the life you live is the belief that you are not ready. But let me tell you something that will change everything. Readiness is a myth. No one is ready. No one ever feels fully qualified to do what they were born for. They just start. And the starting is what makes them ready. The act is the preparation. The doing is the training. Belief is built in motion, not in planning. You will never become unstoppable by waiting. You become unstoppable by choosing to show up exactly as you are and doing it anyway. I once spoke with a woman named Rosa. For years, she dreamed of becoming a coach. She studied, trained, invested thousands in courses. She was prepared on paper, but she never launched. I just do not feel ready, she told me. I asked, what would you do if you believed you already were? She paused. Then whispered, I would start tomorrow. I said, then that is what you do. And she did. Was she perfect? No. Did she make mistakes? Of course. But within 6 months, she had clients, testimonials, confidence she never found in the classroom. Because she stopped waiting to feel qualified. She became qualified by doing the work. This is the pattern of the unstoppable. They act before they are certain. They do not ask the world if they are enough. They show the world what they carry. And the more they act, the more evidence they build. Not for others, for themselves. Every decision, every project, every bold yes becomes proof that they are exactly who they say they are. That is how identity becomes unshakable. Not through words. Through action. And the truth is, there will still be days when doubt creeps in. But the difference is, you will no longer negotiate with it. You will not sit down and argue with your fear. You will not beg your insecurity to leave. You will simply keep moving. That is the power of the unstoppable. They understand that emotions are not dictators. They are weather. They pass. But purpose stays. So how do you begin living from this place? You create an identity that no longer waits for proof. You define who you are not by what has happened to you, but by who you choose to be now. You become the kind of person who does what they said they would do, who keeps showing up, who leads themselves, who acts not from mood, but from mission. And every day, you ask one question: what would the most powerful version of me do today? Then you do it. Even if it is small. Especially if it is hard. You stop making decisions based on fear. You stop asking permission to move forward. You stop waiting for confidence and start building it through courageous repetition. And when the world pushes back, as it will, you hold your ground. Not because you are trying to prove anything, but because you know exactly who you are. And that knowing is louder than their doubt. Write this down: I do not stop when it is hard. I stop when I am finished. That is the mindset of the unstoppable. They do not collapse at resistance. They build muscle through it. They do not avoid pressure. They use it. And over time, that kind of person becomes magnetic. Not because they are lucky. Because they are aligned. So let this be your reminder: you do not need to be extraordinary to begin. But you do need to begin to become extraordinary. You do not need to feel ready. But you do need to act anyway. You do not need the world to believe in you. But you must believe in yourself enough to take the first step. And once you do, you will feel it. The fire. The shift. The quiet knowing that says, I may not be where I want to be yet, but I am no longer who I was. That is the beginning of unstoppable. And once it begins, it does not end. Chapter 12. The courage to be fully seen. There's a kind of courage that few ever truly tap into, not because they do not have it, but because they are afraid of what it might cost. It is not the courage to fight. It is not the courage to speak loud or stand tall. It is the courage to be fully seen, as you are, without the mask, without the performance, without the carefully curated version of yourself that you have built to be accepted, applauded, or admired. It is the courage to live without hiding. Most people live behind something. A title, eye roll, a persona. They become experts in blending in doing what is expected, in managing how much of their soul the world gets to see. Not because they are dishonest, but because at some point they learned that being fully themselves was dangerous. Maybe they were laughed at. Maybe they were rejected. Maybe they were punished for being too emotional, too honest, too bright. So they made a silent decision: it is safer to be a version of me that people can handle, and they have been shrinking ever since. But there comes a moment, usually after the applause stops, or the burnout sets in, or the mirror grows too heavy, when that version of you no longer fits. When you realize that the life you built is not wide enough for your truth. When the cost of hiding becomes greater than the fear of being seen. That is when the real work begins. Because the world does not need more polished masks. It needs your essence. The raw, real, radiant you, the one who has been waiting for permission to breathe. Being seen is not about being liked. It is about being free. It is about walking into rooms and not contorting yourself to be what they need. It is about speaking what is true for you even when your voice trembles. It is about telling your story not to gain sympathy, but to claim your power. It is about no longer dimming your light just because someone else cannot handle the brightness. But do not mistake this for easy. Being fully seen is terrifying. Because once you drop the mask, you cannot blame rejection on the version of you they saw. You know it was the real you. And that kind of exposure requires deep self-love. The kind that says, even if they do not choose me, I will not abandon myself. That is the foundation. Because when your worth is no longer tied to being understood, you are finally free to be. I remember speaking with a woman named Gia. She had built a life around perfection. Her social media was flawless. Her words always careful. Her image perfectly crafted. But inside she was drowning. I feel invisible, she said. Not because no one sees me, but because no one sees the real me. I asked her what she was afraid of. If I show them who I really am, she said, they might leave. I nodded. But what if the people who leave were never loving you in the first place? She broke. Because that is the fear, is it not? That if we are truly seen, we will be truly abandoned. But the truth is, you were never loved if you were never known. And being chosen while hiding is not validation, it is loneliness with a mask. So how do you begin? You start small. You speak a truth you have been holding. You say, actually, I do not agree. You say, this is what I really want. You say, that hurt me. And you say it not with anger, but with clarity, with calm, with ownership. Because authenticity is not aggression. It is alignment. It is choosing to live in a way that matches your inner truth. You will lose people. Let them go. You will make others uncomfortable. Let them adjust. You will face misunderstanding. Let it pass. Because what you gain is sacred: your voice, your peace, yourself minus respect. You gain people who see you and stay. You gain relationships built on truth, not illusion. And you gain a life that feels like yours, not a performance, but a presence. You must also begin to see yourself. Because being fully seen by others begins with being fully seen by you. Can you sit with your story without shame? Can you look at your scars without flinching? Can you meet your younger self and say, "You are safe now"? Healing does not come from pretending. It comes from presence. From the decision to no longer run from the parts of yourself that feel unworthy. From the gentle, daily practice of loving the pieces you were taught to hide. Write a letter to the version of you who first learned to hide. Tell them they did a good job protecting you. Tell them they no longer have to carry that weight. Thank them. Then set them free. Because you are safe now. And your truth is not too much. Your light is not too bright. Your story is not too messy. You are exactly who you were meant to be, and the more you live from that truth, the more your life begins to reflect it. This chapter is your permission to stop apologizing. To stop asking, "Is it okay if I am this big, this bold, this honest?" Yes, it is okay. It is necessary. Because someone is waiting for the version of you that you have been hiding. Someone needs your truth to unlock their own. Someone needs your light to remember theirs. You are not just living for you, you are leading by being. And when you begin to live without the filter, when you stand in rooms with your full truth present, unedited, you will feel it. The shift. The return. The peace that only comes when nothing is hidden anymore. That is the gift. That is the reward. Not everyone will like it. Not everyone will stay. But you will. You will no longer leave yourself to be loved by others. And that is the beginning of wholeness. Resetting the standard of your mind. There comes a time in your journey not when you need more knowledge, more books, more tools, but when you need a reset. Not a temporary motivation, but a deep, permanent shift. A reset of your standard. A realignment of what you tolerate, what you pursue, what you allow. Because everything in your life is a reflection of the standards you have accepted, whether you set them consciously or inherited them by default. Look around you. Your habits. Your relationships. Your results. All of it flows downstream from the silent agreements you made with yourself. And most people never question those agreements. They assume that what they have is what they deserve. They believe the story they were handed without rewriting it. They live by old codes written by old versions of themselves, versions created in survival, in trauma, in self minus protection. But you are not that person anymore. And if your life is not caught up to the person you are becoming, it is time to reset the code. A mindset reset is not about thinking more positively. It is about becoming radically honest. It is about taking full responsibility for where you are and full ownership of where you are going. It is about refusing to live one more day inside a reality that does not match your truth. That takes courage. That takes integrity. That takes a willingness to disappoint others in order to be loyal to yourself. The first thing you must do is stop making excuses for what drains you. We are so good at justifying dysfunction. We say things like, "It is not that bad," or "at least it is stable," or "maybe I am asking for too much." No. You are not asking for too much. You are remembering what you are worth. You are no longer willing to shrink your desires to match your environment. That is not greed. That is alignment. You must stop saying yes to things you would never choose if you believed in yourself. Every time you tolerate what dishonors you, you send a signal to your subconscious, "This is what we deserve," and your mind obeys. It stops reaching. It stops dreaming. It starts adjusting downward to fit the lie. But when you reset the standard, when you say, "This is the line, and I will not cross it again," everything begins to shift. The people, the energy, the opportunities, Because you are no longer sending mixed messages to the universe. You are clear. And clarity is power. Let me ask you plainly, what are you no longer willing to tolerate in your life? Write it down. Speak it out loud. Not just the obvious things, the toxic relationships, the dead end jobs, but the subtle things too. The inner critic that runs your mind. The habit of apologizing for your joy. The need to explain your worth. The way you downplay your success to keep others comfortable. These are the silent assassins of your greatness. And unless you call them out, they will keep ruling you from the shadows. This reset is about standards. Not goals. Not wishes. Standards. What you will and will not allow. What you require from yourself. What you demand from life. And the standard must be set not by what is convenient, but by what is true. You are not here to live a life that simply looks good on paper. You are here to live a life that feels like home to your soul. But the reset must also happen in your thoughts. Because your mind is the soil, and every belief is a seed. You cannot plant doubt every day and expect a harvest of confidence. You cannot feed yourself fear and expect courage to grow. The thoughts you dwell in become the atmosphere of your life. And most people are living inside mental environments that suffocate them. Environments full of what if I fail and who am I to try and nothing ever works for me. That must stop now. You are the gatekeeper of your mind. You decide what stays. You decide what gets planted. You must become fierce about your mental diet. Read what builds you. Watch what aligns with your truth. Speak what reinforces your power. And when an old thought shows up, an old script, an old story, you interrupt it. You say, that is no longer the frequency I operate on. You shift. Again and again. Until the new becomes the normal. And yes, this will feel unfamiliar at first. It will feel fake. Your body may even resist. That is okay. That is healing. You are breaking neural pathways built in fear. You are rewiring your identity. You are not just thinking new thoughts. You are building a new self. To make this practical, I want you to do this. Choose 3 new standards for your life. 1 for how you think. 1 for how you speak to yourself. 1 for what you allow from others. Write them. Post them. Repeat them. Live by them. Not perfectly, but consistently. Because standards are not enforced by intensity. They are enforced by repetition. And over time, your brain will adjust. Your decisions will align. And your life will rise to meet you. This chapter is not about inspiration. It is about sovereignty. It is about reclaiming the authority over your life that you have been giving away. To fear. To others. To the past. That ends now. You are the author. You are the architect. You are the standard. Let this be the day you say, no more small thinking. No more shrinking. No more waiting for permission. Let this be the moment you choose to believe in yourself, not as a concept, but as a command. A requirement. A non-negotiable. You do not get the life you want. You get the life you are willing to require. So require more. From your thoughts. From your words. From your presence. From your future. This is the reset. Not because you are broken, but because you are ready. The final call to rise. This is it. Not the end, but the edge. You are standing on the edge of everything you were meant to become. And from this place you have a choice to make, perhaps the most important one of your life. Will you go back to what is familiar, or will you rise into what is calling you? Will you retreat into the comfort of old patterns, or will you trust the fire that has burned away everything false and left only the raw material of who you truly are? Because belief is no longer a theory for you. It is no longer a distant hope. It is no longer a wish whispered in dark corners. It is now. It is in your bones. It is in your breath. It is in the way you hold yourself, in the way you walk into a room, in the silence between your words. You are no longer asking if you are enough. You are declaring it with your presence, with your discipline, with your love. But this final call is not a cheer. It is a demand. It is the voice of your own soul standing at the gates of your future and saying, I am done playing small. It is the version of you that has waited patiently through every excuse, every delay, every fear finally rising on saying, I am not here to survive. I am here to live wide open. This world does not need more half-minded committed people. It does not need more performers, more perfectionists, more people living by default. This world is desperate for those who live with conviction, who move with courage, who believe in themselves so completely that their very existence gives others permission to do the same. You can be that person. You already are. The journey has not been easy. You have had to let go. You have had to unlearn. You have had to say goodbye to versions of yourself that once protected you. You have felt the weight of loneliness, the sting of rejection, the ache of uncertainty. And still you are here. Still breathing. Still rising. Still willing to become. That is not weakness. That is divinity in motion. That is power. You have learned that belief is not a feeling. It is a standard. You have learned that doubt is not a stop sign, it is an invitation to recalm it. You have learned that your past does not get to define your future unless you allow it. You have learned that the world cannot give you what you refuse to give yourself. And you have learned that there is no authority greater than your own decision to be who you are. So this is your moment. Not to wait. Not to question. To decide. Decide that your voice will no longer be silenced by insecurity. Decide that your light will no longer be dimmed by the comfort of others. Decide that your future will no longer be a hostage to your past. Decide that you are not just someone with potential, you are someone who delivers. Decide that this life, this one brief, sacred life, will not be wasted in hesitation. You were not born to be a question mark. You were born to be a statement. A declaration. A presence that shifts the atmosphere. And from this day forward, you carry a new identity not of someone hoping but of someone knowing. Knowing that belief is your baseline. Knowing that greatness is not reserved, it is revealed by choice. Knowing that your power is not coming. It is already here. It always was. So go. Speak the truth, even when your voice shakes. Take the risk even when the outcome is unclear. Show up as the most authentic version of yourself even when the world is watching. You owe it to no one to explain your calling. You owe it to yourself to answer it. No one can walk this for you. No one can carry your fire. But if you choose it, if you decide fully, deeply, now your life will never be the same. The time for waiting is over. The time for permission is over. The time for belief is now. You must believe in yourself not someday, not when it is easy, not when they understand. No. Because the moment you do, the world shifts. The doors open. The storm quiets. The clarity comes. Not because belief changes everything around you, but because it changes you. And when you change, everything else must follow. So rise. Not because you are unafraid, but because you are done living in the shadow of who you could have been. This is the final call. And this time, you answer it. If you've listened this far, then you're not just curious, you're ready. Ready to stop doubting, stop shrinking, and start stepping into who you were meant to be. From this point on, carry yourself like you've already won. Because deep down, you always were meant to.